Hi, everyone, and welcome to Be Above Leadership's YouTube channel. If you like what we're talking about, please subscribe and you'll get regular updates on videos that we're putting out. Today, we're talking about what some people are calling third quarter stress, or kind of what's happening as we're navigating this coronavirus and what might be happening in your brain right now. So hi, I'm with my wonderful partner, Ursula. Hi, Ursula.
Hi, Ann. Wow, yes, third quarter stress so different from where we were a month ago, 2 months ago. I really feel my stress level being very different from when we first, when we first began.
Yeah, I think so. And, I have to also say, when someone said the third quarter, there was a part of that. I saw an article that's part of what we're going to be talking about today, this third quarters phenomenon. And the bottom line is like, it's the toughest time, the third quarter. But I also sort of went like, God, I hope we're in the third quarter. Like, how long are these quarters, like holy mackerel.
Well,
But
yeah, you're so right. I mean, they've done research on the third quarter. There were, as you forwarded this to me, I was really fascinated. I'd never thought about, Arctic research stations, submarines, astronauts, being up there for, however. And I thought, yeah, third quarter. But what about fourth quarter, fifth quarter, sixth quarter? What's the research on that?
how many quarters are there? But what we wanted to talk about today was a couple of things that do seem to be different as we're approaching this time. And, there's more than this, but there were three things that we think are really putting us on what someone else called the Coronacoaster, which I think is just a great word.
Yeah.
And so three things that we're thinking about that we want to talk about today. One is that novelty is down. And
Yes.
we're going to talk a little more about what novelty does in the brain, but our novelty is down. This isn't novel anymore. Our decision making, our need to make decisions, and the tax of decision making on the brain, and it is one of the more energy intensive things your brain does, is make decisions. That's up because we have to make more decisions. They're not being made for us as much at this point that we're talking about today. And then stuff that we have been just sort of what we call in coaching self-managing, like sort of managing and kind of getting through, has tipped over into full-on suppression, which is never good for our brain.
And none of it, novelty down, decision making up, and suppression up, self-management down, none of that is good for our brain as it relates to, stress levels and how we feel.
Absolutely. Let me actually share my screen and we can, talk about a model that we learned many, many years ago. And this was developed from Amy Arnsten out of Yale, where she studied the chemical composition of the prefrontal cortex. And that's part of your brain that's right here, right sort of behind your eyes. And if you're obviously watching this on YouTube, you can see that we've put some of the really positive aspects of the prefrontal cortex in blue on this slide. Ursula, you want to tell us some of what they are there?
Yeah, so the positive aspects, or rather the aspects that when our prefrontal cortex is functioning well, are goal direction, delaying gratification. I think that one particularly is hugely challenging right now, delaying the gratification to go shopping, to a clothing store, to a restaurant, etc. Making and retrieving memories, decision-making generally, which we're going to dive in a little more in a minute, understanding what others are thinking. I have a real problem with that right now. And abstract concepts. So all these pieces, I think, are so important to what's happening right now.
Yeah, and some people say, the words that we have in the blue here are, what it's like the seat of personality. This is kind of what makes us us. Some people refer to the prefrontal cortex as the executive director of your brain, but it's not a part of your brain you want to have kind of not working well. because then what you get are things like foggy thinking, poor impulse control, poor decision making, poor memory, lack of empathy, black and white thinking. And Ursula, I think you're right that we're seeing some of this happening right now. And all of this sort of technically, we're going to talk about it technically, then we're going to look and see like, what is all of this and what do you do about it? But it is because of the level of neurotransmitters, a specific class called catecholamines, that are activated in the brain. And your brain wants there to be just the right amount of these catecholamines. The two that Dr. Arnsten studied are dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine being very related to reward and anticipation, norepinephrine being stimulation.
Yeah, and I love that she calls it the Goldilocks of the brain. Depending which country you're listening from, it's really the story of Goldilocks and the three bears and testing out their beds. And one bed is too hard, one is too soft, and one is just right. And so referring it to this very strange flip-flopping of too little, too much, is really the place where we lose the blue words and we get into the red.
When our brains are either understimulated because there's not enough of these catecholamines, we're not getting enough dopamine, we're not getting enough reward, anticipation, and stimulation. And I think we're going through that right now. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. But we're also can be on the other hand where we're actually finding in some areas of our lives too much stimulation, too much anticipation we don't know what to do with. So we can be on the one hand deficient and on the other hand flooded, and either one, and that's why it's a bell curve, takes us to this place where we are honestly just not at our best.
Yes.
And I've been noticing that. Maybe you and I can even just share some examples. You know, I was saying to Ursula earlier, I'm noticing this for myself. I don't know if it's too little or too much. We'll explore that a little bit more later. But, you know, I go to the grocery store and I'm waiting to get to park. And I am not that person who's just like, come on, you know, get out of there and move your butt. And I'm finding myself in my car, you know, sort of being less patient than usual, being more judgmental, being more like, come on. Not that I have anywhere to go, but you know, not that it's so critical that they get out of their parking spot so quickly. But for me, that's that lack of empathy that I can find that you find on either side of the curve. How about for you, Ursula? What are some of your...
lack of empathy, that's true for me as well, but I want to grab another one of the red words, which is understanding others, which is related to empathy, but it's a slightly different bucket. You know, I look at some of the, you know, reports, you know, on television and read some of the newspaper articles, and I am really getting into a place where I'm so judgmental, with so little compassion for anything, you know, and really literally my brain is going, like, I don't understand these people. Where are they coming from? I don't understand it. And it's an interesting thing that when I'm in just right in my normal life, I am not like that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm just going to share again, you know, because in even talking about this, and I just had an insight this morning as you and I are talking about this, that I've been wondering why people are making some of the decisions that they're making. And that to me don't necessarily look like a decision that I would make. And I think about, you know, where they might be on this curve.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you can liken this to, you know, when your brain operates optimally, have not been in a situation where our brains have been able to operate optimally. And I think about the correlation to, for example, I don't make very good decisions after I've had a couple of drinks. You know, eating a whole bag of cookies sounds really good after I've, this is one of the reasons that I really have to watch, like even having a glass of wine, because I notice that my impulse control goes out the window. Yeah. It's going to have an impact up here.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that for some people, I'm not talking about alcohol, I'm just using that as a correlation, that some of what may be happening is they've been so bored and or so stressed that maybe some of the decisions are not the decisions they might make were their brain in a better state.
Yes.
And actually, sort of looking at that way gives me a little more empathy. I don't know about you, Ursula,
No,
but
I do. And it's really helpful to look at the slide again because, there's in the red black and white thinking. And I have been in that place, as you know, Jetze, my husband, is due to return to Florida on Friday to continue opening the hotel that he's projecting in. And I am in this black and white, okay, you go, but you don't need to think about coming back here. You're going to stay wherever you are. That's you now. I'm here, you are there. There will be no interactions after that. I mean, that's totally black and white thinking. I can't look at the shadings of gray and having this be in this abstract, thinking about it abstractly. It's just
yeah.
like it's either or.
And so I think part of our maybe self-compassion during this is recognizing, as as strong as we may all feel, our brains are probably a little compromised. The best of our brains are probably some compromised. And we used to call this, this is a model that we've taught for many years. And I remember at one point we talked about what we called the EWS, EWS, and we called it the early warning signs. So
Yes.
I think that my brain is totally fine. Here's an early warning sign for me. It's when I go to the grocery store and instead of waiting patiently for 30 seconds for somebody to pull their car out, I'm irritated. That's an early warning sign that's telling me maybe my brain isn't doing as well as I thought it was. So do you have an ew, Ursula?
Oh, and I hate to say it, as they're all ooze. I do find poor memory is one of my very early warning signs. I am constantly looking for my glasses or my cell phone, constantly.
Yeah.
Where is? I'm constantly wandering around. I'm literally wandering around the house, looking and not seeing it. And my husband coming, but they're right there.
They're on your head.
I know, I'm wearing them right now.
It's a really good one. That can be a very early one. That is a sign of stress that you can, lose your train of thought. Some of us anyway, if you've got a lot on your mind, you can wander into the other room and not remember how you went there. Some of this is just normal human functioning. But when it's happening more than usual, it may be an early warning sign you're either understimulated or overstressed.
Yeah.
The impulse control, I think, and I think that this, it's a couple of things. One is, talk about the COVID-19 putting on weight.
Oh.
But it's also the saying the thing maybe you wouldn't have said because you don't have the regulator on, or you holding back for so long that's created some stress. That's part of what suppression will do, is certain stress. And then you find yourself saying something that you don't mean, or you wouldn't have said it maybe you do mean it, but you wouldn't have said it at another time because you actually really care about the person. I think that can be another or like you find yourself just saying those little things you wouldn't have said. That can be an early warning sign. I think also, don't you think foggy thinking, Ursula?
Yes. And this is interesting because of our work, you and I, when we work, foggy thinking is it's not a good thing. What I am finding is, in order to literally wrestle my prefrontal cortex back into my brain, it takes a lot more effort for me to lead a class, to coach, to look at my PowerPoint, my timelines. It takes a lot more effort. So I have less capacity as it relates to hours. I can maybe do an hour and a half, 2, and then I'm completely exhausted. So I can do it, but it takes a lot more effort.
Probably because your existing stress load may already have you a little. So if you think about just right, and by the way, everybody's just right is the center of the curve. It may be a different amount of, just like cars have different size gas tanks. Your gas tank may be bigger, but everybody's just right is right in the middle. It's like to use the car analogy, it's like having the engine not cold, not too cold, but not too hot. So what puts you there can be very different. Some people have a much bigger capacity for stress than others, but everybody's is right in the middle. That's how this works. So, you know, when you're talking about being able to manage less, it's probably because we're all a little tipped over
Yes.
in too much, or maybe a little, maybe a little in the less. So you can't take as much input
Yeah.
at that
Yes.
point.
Yeah,
I,
no, that's absolutely true.
I noticed an interesting thing. I love to read, and I love to read like really good writing that has a level of good language and well-used language and complexity. I can't. I
Mm.
can't right now. I feel like I need, as my son jokingly said to me at one point, why do all your books have pink covers? Like, really, all I can manage right now is Bridget Jones' Diary. Like, like now, like I can't even do a good murder mystery because I lose the plot immediately.
You can't follow the plot.
Lost the plot, that's for sure. So yeah, all of these early warning signs. So let's just talk a little more about this thing about novelty, because I think this is this weird roller coaster where one minute we're kind of, you know, not doing well because we're sort of bored and we don't have enough going on in our mind, and the next minute we got 80 things to think about and manage.
Yeah.
And that's the roller coaster, Ursula.
Yeah, totally. That is that, roller coaster, the flip-flopping. So when we first started, in regards to my novelty, I kind of got excited. It was like, oh, I'm, not going anywhere. I'm not traveling anymore. I'm going to have time to organize all my photographs. I'm going to have time to organize this and, start writing and painting and journaling. Well, no. I mean, I maybe did that on and off in the first month, but that has, the baking has gotten old. The organizing, I've no interest in it anymore. So that these kinds of novel things that were exciting and stimulating, the first half or the first 2 quarters, it's not stimulating anymore.
Well, they're not new anymore. And
No.
so part of that, part of what your brain is doing as you're trying something new is that it's giving you some hits because you're not familiar with it yet. But when it goes into familiarity, even just the virtual happy hours, and that was fun a couple of times and then maybe wasn't as fun.
Yeah.
And then, we'll talk about the other side of the curve as well. But I think about, absolutely relate to you. The first couple of times I did anything was like, oh, now I have a whole couple of hours to paint. And it's not like, I don't feel like it. Because it's not necessarily giving me the same juice, the same hit.
Yeah, right. It's, I also find, talking about the neurotransmitter of dopamine, what was rewarding to begin with, it's not rewarding anymore. And I think, you were talking about, it's also in anticipation of a future reward. That I think has become harder and harder the longer this goes on, because that future timeline has been pushed and pushed and pushed, where I'm at a point now where I'm not even believing there is a timeline.
Well, and thinking about things like you and I had a trip to Rotterdam planned for September,
Yeah.
which does not seem like something we're going to plan right now. That's a decision, we're making. We don't know. But, we have to plan a few months out, and there's some anticipation about, Rotterdam, it's so cool. And we get to go to Europe, and what else could we do? And it's like, now, I don't have any travel planned through the end of the year. Now that might change, but the research basically says we're happier when we're planning for a trip than when we're on it because of that activates this dopamine, which is one of the jobs that dopamine has in the brain, is to cue us in terms of what to pay attention to.
Well, this is interesting. My birthday was like 3 days ago, and the previous 2 weeks leading up to my birthday, I could feel my curve, my just right curve, being in more of a just right, because I was looking forward to my birthday. I love the surprises. I love the cards, the messages, what I had planned for that day. And so I think that actually helped me regulate my dopamine and norepinephrine in my prefrontal cortex. Well, birthday has come and gone. It's 3 days later, and I'm actually finding a little bit of a downturn. It's almost like a little bit of a sort of a let up.
Get down. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think for some people, some of the decisions that they may be making that, we might not agree with, what they're actually doing is looking for some dopamine, looking to
Yes.
do something different, whether that looks to some of us like it's safe or not. Yeah. I do think that's maybe part of the reason that they're making those decisions, because I've done everything I can do within the four walls of my house.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it, from a neuroscience perspective, it's sort of interesting to us, but I do think we have to work to keep our brains in, we're working a lot harder than usual. Yeah. To try to keep our brains anywhere near the top of the curve. So let's explore this personally. I'm super curious, Ursula. I love to look at both sides of the curve. So where in your life do you feel like you are on the side of the curve that is too little? Like you don't have enough of the chemicals infusing your brain?
Well, I think the too little is the novelty side. Is really looking at, what else is stimulating, what is creative, but is also mindful and intentional about the impact I have on the world. So it is largely related to what can I do within my house, what can I do with you, it's a tough one, because I also find I sometimes lack the energy to actually plan something that's novel and mindful. It's a really, I want it, I need it, and yet I seem to lack the energy to actually make an effort.
I think you're speaking for a lot of people right now. How about on the other side, in the too much? Where are you? What parts of your life feel like they're just giving you an influx of brain chemicals, too much, too many?
Well, we were talking about the three components early on of the third quarter, novelty down, decision up, and then, suppression is at a limit. So decision making is up, and that is where I'm over the curve. I mean, it's the logistics about my husband going back, to Florida. I'm staying where I am here in Minneapolis, what that will mean logistically, and just also, when he's gone, then how do I manage all the things that he has managed, like grocery shopping and errands and post office? It's, the mask, the social distancing, much of it I didn't have to concern myself about because he did it. And now that is in the mix, and it's, I stood in my kitchen yesterday and looked around, and I thought, I wouldn't know where to begin.
Well, you're really, you're the interesting thing about this, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, when I find it's the mental processing, it's the decision making. Yeah. Where can I go? Is this safe? What are the rules? What do I need to do? Do I have hand sanitizer in the car? How, the endless emails that I had with a very small group of friends who've all been socially isolating, and we talked about getting together for a socially distant dinner, and I'm not faulting anyone. It was really a process and we ended up not doing it. As we sort of looked through, how did we feel about it? What is the right decision to make? And I'm thinking that, normally it's just like, do you want to come over for dinner on Friday night?
Yes. Yeah. There's no process. You either say yes or no because you can or because you can't. It's very simple.
And what would be the circumstances and how would we do it? And it's just taking a lot more energy. So what do you feel like, where do you feel like you're more tipped? Or is it really the roller coaster for you?
It is a total roller coaster. I'm really, really, really noticing that, and as we know, whether you're into little or into much, the red words, the how you feel stay the same. So I think the other issue that many people probably will have as they look at the curve is not knowing where they even are.
Great.
Am I into little or am I into much? I mean, it's all the same thing. Like, that's just one big mess.
I just put the curve back up again because I was thinking, when I go to the grocery store, is it too little or too much? The red words.
Yeah.
So that's what can be really helpful in speaking to someone like a coach, for example, or a trusted friend, to kind of start sorting out. So let me ask you both questions. So what is one thing that you might be able to do that would increase your stimulation that wouldn't be exhausting? Because that's what I heard, is that it's just too tiring.
I really think what I need to increase is time away from emails and Zoom calls and the kind of structured activities, and do something that's more, more of the default mode network, which we've talked about before, more the brain at rest. Funnily enough, the thing that comes to mind is gardening. And I really garden very little because I have a very small garden that's mainly taken care of. But I have this desire to just be outside and just walk without any kind of having to think, I think is an interesting place.
Yeah, kind of a gentle stimulation.
Yep. A gentle stimulation. Yep.
Do something that's interesting. But because we're on this roller coaster, anything that's too much, like learning a new language is going to...
Oh my gosh, no.
This is sort of early on in this whole thing, couple of social media influencers are like, if you're not learning a new language and, how to save the world, you're not using your time well. But that's not recognizing we may not have the mental... We have to sort of bring the one side up but very carefully not tipping over the other side.
Yeah, no, you are saying this very well. It's a really, I think the regulation of the prefrontal cortex is a gentle calibration of making sure that one is in this range of just right. It's not like, here you're in just right and this is where you will stay forevermore. Life will move you in this range, and to be gentle about it, I think, is such a good point you're raising.
Yeah, it looks very simple, like you're either over here and too much or over here and too little. But what we've realized with ourselves is that you can sort of strangely be in both places at once. Yeah. It can be, over the course of a day, you can be stressed out about things that are not stimulating and that you don't care about, like having to cook dinner for your family one more night can feel both stressful and boring at the same time, because it's just not interesting.
You know what? I am so happy we're having this conversation. Yesterday, I couldn't decide, and at one point, I'm saying to my husband, "We're not having anything. I can't deal with it. I mean, there's the fridge. Go. I mean, I'll have a piece of cheese."
Yeah. Well, and again, it's back. Nothing is novel. Nothing is that interesting. Been there, done that. Not, usually go out to eat or whatever. And it's also too stressful to make the decision.
Yes, totally.
So one thing you could do is sort of this gentle hobby that is kind of a little interesting, but isn't stressful.
Yes.
Is there something on the other side where that would reduce? So that would kind of maybe increase a little bit of your stimulation. Yeah. Something that would reduce your stress?
Yeah, it's what we were talking about early on. It's the decision making, the yes and no and maybe and this and that. And I think what always has worked well for my brain is to be clear on what decisions I have to make. And it's interesting, in the blue words, it's goal direction. So it's not surprising that I find making a decision hard, because my prefrontal cortex has not been able to actually look at a clear goal and what the direction is.
Right.
So I need to tap into that and say to myself, what is the goal for this week? What is the goal for when Jetze leaves on Friday? And just keep that again gentle and small, not what's the goal for the next 3 weeks. What's the goal for this week? And that, I think, will really reduce some of that overwhelm and really have my prefrontal cortex get a little bit more in the zone.
I really love that. And that's also sort of, it makes me think of, I'm sure there's a really good phrase for this somewhere in human development, but it's kind of like, it's like sphere of influence.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Sometimes I feel like I have to make a decision about something I actually don't have to make any decision about.
Good
It's
point.
out of my control whether people are mobbing the beaches in Florida. It is out of my control. I have no decision to make there, but my brain is operating as if I have a decision to make. And so
Yes.
a little bit of regulation of saying that's not my sphere of influence. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it might be for Jetze, your husband, he's got to make some decisions about how he deals with all these partiers in Florida, because that's where the hotel is. But it's not my decision to make. And so it's saying, what are the decisions I do have to make this week? What are my goals? What is it, and I like how you used to keep them gentle and simple. I think that's really, really a great. How do you feel having kind of explored both sides?
Well, what I am so surprised at is that we have been working with this for years and years and years, and just looking at it again, looking at the red and blue words and realizing why I've been feeling so discombobulated and out of sync has been, so helpful. And knowing just your last words, I have been trying to make decisions in my brain, not like just like you said, Florida, the beaches, the hotel, there's nothing I can do about it, but my brain has been saying, yes you can, yes you should. And so just letting go of that is hugely helpful, and saying, this is my decision range lies within this context
Yeah.
and only in here, and I can't go any further.
And what we might have extra energy for at other times, we don't. And so to say, like, how do I want to use my energy that is more limited right now, given what we're going through? And I think, what I would hope people take away is being really aware of your early warning signs.
Yeah.
And the difference between kind of you at your best and you tipped a little bit. Are you losing a little more memory? Are you a little more impatient than usual? Is your impulse control down? And that can tell you, well, what can you do to kind of look to see, can you get that dial back here? Is there something that is not stressful, but is interesting that you can do that will give you a little bit of that burst of novelty, that kind of, that'd be fun to do tomorrow, or like that. And then are there ways that you can just kind of pull your energy back so that it's not, things are not constantly stressing you out. And I think people have talked from the very beginning, Ursula, about things like limiting media, because that'll put you over on the stress curve. And that's a simple thing you can do. It's like, how much do you need to consume? And
Yep.
maybe that's the way that your needle gets back. But I just want to say one more thing. I know I'm talking a lot, but the other thing is, you had said we've been working with this probably for almost 10 years. This is such a fascinating understanding of the brain.
Yeah.
And it is something you and I constantly ask ourselves and each other, which is kind of like, how's your Goldilocks? And even just having that in mind, it's this constant question of, what is it that I need to be at this better functioning state where I can handle more of what's coming along?
And the other thing that I would add in is that just looking at this this model and this research I hope gives to the listener, gives you a lot of self-compassion, because if you think about poor impulse control, you know why this is now. It's not because you're not disciplined, or you just love cookies too much. It really literally is an impact of the chemicals that are not in balance, and I think that can be hugely helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And then also the extra, this is only one part of the brain. And I think about the thing that, the decision making drains glucose. The brain runs on glucose.
Yeah.
Every time you make a decision, it's like stepping on the gas on your car, use a little more gas in your car. And so your brain is looking for ways to replace that glucose. And often when we're really stressed and have had to make a lot of decisions, the brain is looking for a quick way.
Yes.
And the quickest way is the purest form of glucose, which is usually sweets.
Yes.
Wine. Also, wine is a very quick glucose delivery device.
Yeah.
And so all of those things may be why you're thinking, why is it that it's harder for me to control that? Some of it is just your brain demanding the energy it needs to get through the day.
Yeah.
Ursula.
Well, this was wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Anne, for all your great questions. And, I really hope that people who are listening to this segment are really, really looking at that and finding ways to help their brain be in a just right.
Absolutely. And so again, as always, we love it. If you like this video, hit the little like button. We really appreciate it. Gives us a little dopamine. Come on. Likes are good for that. And then always subscribe and share if you think this would be helpful for anybody else. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.